Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Unreal multiplayer playlist. At this point, we already have the groundwork set up for the classes that we're going to be using. The input receiver is ready to use. So we're going to return to the game mode in this video. And inside of here, we're just going to implement the logic to find all of the player starts that we have in the level, store a reference to those, and then spawn in all of the player receivers ready to take that user input to spawn a player into the world. Now, a few things we can do as well to tidy the class. We can get rid of the event tick as we won't be using this. And we can also make sure that we're on the class defaults and just disable the start with tick enabled as we won't be using the tick. We don't need any of that toggling or running in the background. The first task then, getting our player start points, is going to be very simple. We can drag from the begin play. We'll search for get all actors of class, and we can just choose the get all actors of class option. The player start is a standard class in the engine, so we can just type player start here, and we can see we get the option for the player start class just below. So that's going to be the first step. I then said that we want to store all of these as a reference. We're going to use this array of the found objects a little bit later. So we'll promote this to a variable, and I'll just name this one player start array. And I just wanted to go into a little bit of theory before going on to the next step around the player starts. And that's just because I think there is a little bit of kind of mystery behind what these are, why they're used in the general kind of spawning setup. And maybe they've been mystified to the point a bit for some people, especially those new to the engine, that you think they could potentially be a special class or like there's a special thing going on under the hood. What these are really, if we look at it, it is just a standard actor class. It has a capsule component and an arrow and some exposed properties such as the player start tags. Now the only reason these are the default is because in the C++ side of the game mode classes, just before the event begin play in our blueprint function, there's an initialize function going on, which is basically doing exactly what we've done here. It's finding all of the player starts and it's finding one, hopefully, that has the auto receive input boolean or enum set to the correct player. So that's really what it's doing. If it finds one successfully, then that is going to be the chosen spot at which the player is spawned. Again, under the hood in C++, that's going to be based on what we have in the settings for our default pawn class, again, if that is set. And that's exactly why we want to remove this, because we don't want that C++ side of things having control over how we set things up. But it is, again, we're going to also override that. Because we don't have the default pawn, we need to override that and find all of our player start points again. And by storing this reference, we can then get and store the information about all of these player start tags as well. So the reason I mention that is that some people have already commented that they think it would be quite interesting to know how we can override things because maybe it isn't discussed very much. So I just wanted to provide a little bit more insight and information to those of you who weren't aware that this is just a very standard class. Now the way we're doing this, for example, with the get all actors of class, we could literally replace this with something like a sphere mesh, and then as long as we search for all sphere meshes in the level, and we'll use those as our starting point reference, we could spawn all of our actors at different sphere meshes or point lights or whatever you want to use as a start location. So that's really all that's happening here. This could be interchanged with anything else. And another reason I mention that is because something I do quite a lot, for example, in the game jam that I showed in the beginning of this playlist, the kind of thing which inspired this, is I actually created my own player starts, which was, again, a simple actor class with a sphere for the visualization. And by doing this, this gives you a lot of extra power, again, is that we can start overriding things. So, for instance, the player start tag is a text field. I changed this to just use an integer, so I could just directly get the integer value rather than converting that, which is what we'll be doing a bit later. You can then also put your default player class inside of your custom player start. So again, for my multiplayer thing, I had the option to swap in like different characters using that player start drop down in the custom player start class. So you can really start fleshing things out, adding your own functionality in there if you wanted to expand this and stop using the default player start system. Okay, so sorry, quick aside there, tried keeping that quite short, but like I said, I know some people were interested, so I just wanted to mention that briefly. So what we'll do to wrap this up is we will grab these two nodes, right click on one of these and collapse to function. I'm going to name this new function get player start points, just so that we can keep our blueprint functionality looking as tidy and readable as possible. And that is the first step complete. So for the next step, we are going to spawn in our player input receivers, the classes that we set up in the previous video. And to do that, we can start by running through a for loop. So for each of the player start arrays, so we'll drag in, control drag the player start array. Then for each of these, we want to get some information. So we can do a for each loop based on the number of player starts that we found in the previous function. Now, again, just for performance and readability, the next thing we need to do is, I know that we're going to be storing a reference to our index, and this is going to be best suited in a function again. So I'm going to grab this one node, collapse this to a function, and name this one spawn player receivers. Or in fact, I'll call this one spawn input receivers. With that done, that just means that we can come in here, we can promote this to a local variable, as I know this isn't going to be used outside of this functionality, and I'll just call this one index. This is just going to track which number of the for each loop that we are currently going through, and we'll be using this to pass some information to other classes a little bit later. Okay, so this is going to be our first start of the check for the current index, and we're going to compare this against the player tag that we've set up. So for this reason, we actually want to duplicate the for each loop, and we're going to do another for each loop for each of the player starts again. Now the reason for this will become apparent in a moment, but this is because essentially we don't know which order we're going to be finding all of these player starts at the beginning of play. And for that reason, index, the first one that we loop through, may not correlate to the player starts index that we've given it. So just to confirm that that will be what we're going to do, we'll run through all of these for each loops, and then we'll run through another set of for each loops to compare the player tag that we have and just confirm that that matches the current index we're on. Then if it is, we're going to run through the rest of our logic. And this is how we're going to basically confirm that player 0 always is spawned at player start 0. So if you've got like color coordinating like I have, the blue player will always be spawned at the same point, as will the red, the green, and however you have it set up. So what we'll be doing is for each element that we go through this time, we're going to get the player start tag. So we'll get player start tag. We want to compare this to something. We can only do this by converting it to a string first. So we'll use the name to string. And this is one of the reasons, like I said, that I would generally spend a little bit of extra time on my projects to create a custom player start, just so I don't have to do things like this, because then we're comparing this to the index. So we also want to convert our string to an int. So string to int, and that means that we can now compare the current index that we are going through on this for each loop. So with that done, another thing that I'm going to do is, if we use this in a comparison first of all, this will allow us to easily make a pure function in just a moment. So we'll see if this is equal to another integer. Like I said, we want to check whether that is equal to the current index that we're going through. So if the player start tag is equal to our index, then we can throw in a branch check. Now with that done, I'm just going to drag these three nodes, collapse this to another function, and I'm going to call this one just something simple like name to int, because that's really all this is doing. And then I'm going to tick this to be a pure function. It's not going to change. And this means that we can just use this as part of an argument rather than needing the execution pin to get that running. And then we can plug that into a branch check. So again, this is just making things a little bit smaller and that a little bit tidier. I'll also rename the in pins, and the out pins. I'm going to call this one player start, so we know what we're passing in. And the return value is really going to be, in fact, that's going to be perfectly fine because we are returning the integer. We know what that's doing by the function name. So we're now comparing the index to the current player start name. So if those two are equal to each other, the next thing we want to do is create essentially a slot for the current player or the controller to possess. And we do this using the create player node. We don't need to do anything with this as long as we leave this at -1. This is going to assign the correct slot. The system will find the next available slot to assign this to, so we can leave this as an automatic process, and this will spawn in a new controller to control our new player. And with that new player in kind of taking up memory now, or it's been assigned to the project, we can then use the spawn actor from class to place in our input receiver. This of course will be our BP underscore input receiver. So remember, we're only getting the input receivers ready at the moment and making sure they're in the right place. That place is going to be the location of the current player start. Now you can either drag a pin from wire to wire, which can start getting a little bit messy, or we can get the array and we can get the element. We've got the index still. So we can use our array, get the player start at the current index that we're looking at, so we know that this is the same one. So essentially what this element is here, but it means that we can put this a little bit closer and again, just keep our blueprint a little bit tidier. And then from this, we're going to want to get the transform. So we'll get the actor transform, and that will allow us to set the input receiver to be at the exact point that the player start was. And again, probably guessing, but when we get to the player side of things, we'll be using that input receiver's location as the spawning point of the player when a button is pressed. Now, there's one thing I think that should be showing here, is the index on the input receiver. So maybe we didn't expose that. So I'm just going to go back to the input receiver class, and we should have exposed this. So I'm going to make this public and just compile and save this to make sure that we get this to be exposed on start. So if we right click on this and then refresh the node, I think I still missed one step. So we want this to also, with this selected, make sure we select the expose on spawn, compile this and save again. And there we go. So that means we can now pass that in. And again, this is going to match and be set the player index to be the current index that we're going through. So this information is being passed to everything that might be relevant. And this is going to give you a lot of flexibility. Like I said, I'm only going to be covering the drop-in system, but if you wanted a drop-out system, then again, you still have all of this information of which player starts, which point in the array is going to be relevant to each different player that's dropped in. Now then, final things. So we will get our player start receiver that we have here. I'm going to add unique, and this might not make sense yet, but if we find add unique, this will add an element to an array. Is going to make sure that we don't have two or more of the same thing as we go through. We obviously don't have this array yet, so this is just an easy way that we now have an array of the correct type. So I'm going to promote this to a variable, not local. This is potentially going to be used throughout the class, and I'll name this one player input receiver array. Then with the handy use of some rewrote nodes, I'm just going to drop this down here. Next, we want this to be possessed, so it's actually receiving input. So if we drag from here and type possess, this won't be context sensitive because it's a player controller function. So we'll untick the context sensitive, choose the possess option. So that still knows it's the pawn that we want to possess. And then we're going to get the current player controller. Now, not only are we going to get the player controller, we're going to make sure this is assigned again to the relevant index. So this index is being used over and over in a very handy way. Add another reroute node there, drag this up a little bit to keep this tidy again. And then the final thing is this player controller that we've just got. We again want to add this to a unique slot in an array. So if we type add unique, we can also get rid of the context sensitive options again. So we'll make sure this is always context sensitive again. Add unique, this is going to provide another pin for us. And again, we've got the correct return type, so we can drag from this, promote this to a variable. And I'll just name this one player controller array. So that is our player input receiver function now set up and ready to go as well. So we can do a quick test. What we should have now, we can see we've got the 4 different split screens going on. So this is going to be another part of the topic to mention in case you don't want split screens to be the option here. But if I press start on any of the controllers I have connected, we should be seeing that print string happening if I had the print string still connected. So we've got this ready now for our interface. I still want to test things at the moment, so I'm going to add another print string here. And again, I'll just type hello and just test at the very least the input receivers are doing their thing. So again, it looks as though we should have that because all of these are looking from a different direction based on the 4 player starts. We've got 4 split screens. So this definitely looks as though it's working, but if I press enter, so that's player 1, I'm now going to use my second controller. We've got hello coming, and I have a third controller, and again, hello is working. So this is showing that at least three of the 4 input receivers are here. I think the 4th one is as well. I just currently don't have 4 controllers to test this with. And that sets us up very nicely to actually use this function that we have here, ready to go, to spawn our player in the given location and start processing some of that information. And just to recap very quickly, some of this, like I said, isn't technically doing anything yet. We're not going to be using this array yet, if at all, perhaps, depending on how in-depth we go. But this is the kind of setup that I'll normally go with. It's only a few extra steps, and this means that I've got full control and flexibility to extend on this to have extra systems like sub-menus or something where things are remembered between different selections just by adding a few extra arrays here and tracking this index. So hopefully a lot of this makes sense. I mean, the main things which are happening are all going on up to here. This is all kind of relevant and worthwhile and required to get the current step working. And then we've got this player controller thing just as a simple extra step that you may find useful in your project. So I did want to cover that very quickly. We've covered two of the important topics today, which is actually finding the player starts and then using those to implement our input receivers. Just out of interest, let me know if you will or won't be making this a split screen project. Either way, I will be showing you how to remove the split screen option and also a handy little tip on what we can do to share or remove functionality between the keyboard and the first player controller. All of that will be in the next video. So do be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell to find out as soon as those videos go live. If you enjoyed the video or found this useful, please do leave a like and share the video around. It's always greatly appreciated. And as always, a huge thank you and big shout out to all of the Patreon supporters. I've been getting an extra surge again this month of new people coming over to Patreon and showing their support, which is greatly appreciated. It really helps to allow me to keep the channel going and providing at least the weekly updates. With that said, it's always, of course, appreciated just that people are coming over to the channel and watching the content and hopefully enjoying this. So as ever, thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.